All right, so our next step is picking up that fishing pole. So let's jump to the browser and let's go ahead and type pick up fishing pole and hit enter. And it reads, you pick up the fishing pole, how exciting. And then our inventory now has a fishing pole in it. So let's go ahead and see how that worked. So I'm going to jump back to the editor and let's scroll back up to the top and let's run from the top just like we had before. So we start our session, initialize some variables. Let's skip over the functions and the data and go into the processing. We check to see if a command has been posted, which it has, which is pick up fishing pole. And so we're going to do the run command function on that command. Let's go ahead and jump to run command. I'm going to scroll back up here. And in the run command, we're passing pick up fishing pole. We globalize some variables, set some global commands, skip this because our command isn't in those global commands, convert our command to lowercase, and then grab the possible commands for this location, which is house. And next we're going to see if that command exists in the array of possible commands. So let's go ahead and see if that's the case. I'm going to scroll back down to the data here, and we're going to take a look at the house. Under commands, we do have a pickup fishing pole here. And the code that it's going to run is the pickup function, and it's going to pass fishing pole as the single parameter to it. Let's go ahead and roll back up to run command here. And so next, we're going to go ahead and evaluate that code. So we're looking for the pickup command. So if we scroll down here, we should see it somewhere. Here it is on line 81. So pickup takes a single parameter, which is the object. In this case, it's going to be fishing pole. First, we globalize the log array so that we can add items to it. And next, we're going to see if the object already exists inside of our inventory session variable. Right now, it's an empty array, so this isn't going to be triggered. But if it did already exist, we'd add an item in our log array that said, sorry, it looks like you already have the, and then the name of the object. But what we're actually going to run is this code here because it's not in our inventory yet. And what we're going to do is simply add the object as the text that it is as an item to the end of the inventory session array. So now at this point, the inventory session array has one item in it, which is fishing pole. And then we're going to add an item to the log array that says, you pick up the, and object will be fishing pole in this case. How exciting. Now let's scroll back up to the run command function here. And so we've evaluated this text. We're going to skip this else code because it's not going to run. And now we can go back to our processing down here. So we finished this run command. We're going to check to see if our log array is empty. It's not, so we're going to skip this code. Then we'll render our log array, which is just a single item here that says you picked up the fishing pole, how exciting. And then we're going to render our inventory list. Now this time, we have something different to do here. So we set the default text, but then we're going to check to see if the number of items inside of the inventory is bigger than 0. At this point, it's 1. So we're going to go ahead and run this code. So we're resetting the inventory text, which we defined here, as an unordered list, and then we're just going to take the items in the inventory and generate a list based on it using the implode function, and we're imploding with an ending and opening list item tag and then wrapping an unordered list around it, just like we have with our log message. And then finally, we're going to add our inventory heading, and our interface will stay the same, except now our inventory will have some different text in it. Okay, now let's go back to the browser. So now from here in our demo, we moved east. So let's go ahead and type in east and hit enter. And it says, you're in the yard, what a nice tree. And then we went south. So let's go ahead and type south again. And it says, you are next to a pond, it looks kind of green. So here's where we can use our fishing pole. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll type in use fishing pole. And when I do, it says, you use your fishing pole to get a fish. It looks a little scary, but maybe it will be useful for something. And then it says you pick up the fish. How exciting. Now you recognize this text from when we pick up something using the pickup function. In this case, it doesn't say fishing pole, it says fish, but the text is still the same. And now our inventory has fish in it. So when we typed east and south, that was pretty straightforward. We used the move to function in order to move the user to those different locations and display the description of those places. But when we used our fishing pole, something different happened because we had to check whether we had a fishing pole in our inventory, and then we had to add the fish to our inventory. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened there. So I'm going to go back to the code and scroll up to the top, and let's go ahead and work down from the top. We start our session, initialize a couple of variables. We have our functions, we have our data, and then we check to see if the command got posted. It did, And so we're going to use the run command function on it. So let's go ahead and scroll up to run command again. And now you should be getting pretty familiar with this. We globalize some variables. We have some global commands. We skip this because our command isn't in there. We convert our command to lowercase, and then we grab the commands for this location, which is the pond. We're going to check to see if the key exists. Our command is use fishing pole in the commands list. Let's go ahead and see if it does. I'm going to scroll down to the data, and we have our data pond here. And under commands, we have use fishing pole. And so our next line is going to be evaluating this code on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. It's going to be a little bit harder to read because it's in quotes. It's not syntax highlighted in the editor. So we have an if statement here. And what we're doing is checking to see if the fishing pole exists in the inventory array. If it does, then we're going to run this code, which is adding an item to the log array which says you use your fishing pole to get a fish. It looks a little scary, but maybe it will be useful for something later on. And then we have our semicolon, meaning the end of the command. And then we run the pickup function, again, just like we did with the fishing pole, but this time we pass the value fish. If the fishing pole doesn't exist in the inventory, then we're going to run this code, which is adding an item to the log array. You don't have a fishing pole. If the inventory doesn't include a fishing pole, then we're going to add an item to the log array that says you don't have a fishing pole. So if we scroll up back here to the run command function where we're currently in, we go to this eval line and it runs the code. We add an item to the log array, and then we're going to run pickup and pass fish to it. So let's go ahead and scroll down to pickup. Pickup we've already looked at before. We check to see if the object is already in the inventory, and if it is, we display a sorry text. If it isn't, we go ahead and add the item to the inventory array in the session variable, and then we set a log array item that says you picked up the object. How exciting. Nothing else is going to happen in our run command function, so let's go ahead and scroll down to the processing. Here's where we were. We're all done there. So we're going to check to see if the log array is empty. It's not, so we're going to skip this. Then we're going to render our log array into an unordered list, and then we're going to render our inventory. This time we actually have two things in our inventory. So when we run implode, we're actually going to use this glue between the two items. So what that will look like is our first text and an ending list item tag, and then an opening list item tag and our second item. And then we wrap an opening list item tag and a closing list item tag with an unordered list wrapped all the way around that. We finally add a title to the inventory, and then we render our interface. So now the final thing that we did that we haven't explored the code for yet is typing reset as the command. So I'm going to jump back to the browser, and I'm going to type reset, and it says you've reset your adventure back to square one. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happened when we did that. I'm going to go ahead and stay on the bottom here. We checked to see if there was a command, and we ran it. So let's go ahead and go to run command. And this time, when we check to see if the command is in the global command array, it is. So reset is in here. So we're going to switch based on that. This case will be reset. And so we're going to do what we did in our previous video where we destroyed our session when a user logged out, because virtually what's happening here is the user is just restarting their session altogether. So we're going to run session destroy, and then we're going to start their session again by running the start adventure session function, which will create their session and also set some basic variables there. And then we're going to add an item to the log array that says you've reset your adventure back to square one. So again, from here, we just render our log array into the interface and our now empty inventory.